On this day in 2014, 28th of September, the Occupy Central, or what later became known as the Umbrella Movement, began in Hong Kong. The protests had begun a few days earlier, but on the 28th, the Occupy Central with Love and Peace movement announced the beginning of their civil disobedience campaign. Made mostly of students, these protests would go on for months, and eventually they had the Chinese government back down. After the handover of Hong Kong from the United Kingdom to China in 1997, China had promised that Hong Kong would be democratized. Unfortunately, as is always the case with the communist Chinese, they do not like following through on a promise they've made. The people of Hong Kong became increasingly irritated, increasingly annoyed, and had protested before, back in the early noughties. But bit by bit, the Chinese communists were trying and effectively taking over the former colony. What happened in 1997 when Hong Kong was transferred back to China was it stopped being a British colony and started being a Chinese colony. Now, granted, no one in the People's Republic really has any say in how their lives go. They can't vote. They can't even travel without permission, although that was loosened for a few decades, but now it's being reinstituted. They can't go from their home, go to Shanghai or Peking or Guangzhou and bring their kids, because their kids are not entitled to education or healthcare. Neither are they. They have to pay for it. The hukou system, which you may have heard of, ties people to their place of birth. If you're not lucky enough to be born in a city, well, tough luck. So, in 1997, Hong Kong went from being a British colony to effectively a communist colony. At first, the communists, they stood off and they allowed Hong Kong to continue making money for them. When Hong Kong did become Chinese, it was equivalent to 25% of the GDP of all of China. It was enormous. It was a gem of the Orient. And they didn't want to destroy that, but they did want to use it. And if you know anything about Deng Xiaoping, the one country, two systems, that was originally meant for Taiwan. The whole point of Hong Kong was to get Taiwan back. They've obviously screwed that up since, because no one in Taiwan will want to be a part of the People's Republic of China anymore. But let's get back to this date, this day in history. Now, this day might not seem that important, but I would disagree with you. Everything that we've seen in the past few years, everything that we've seen in the past year, China just stumbling from one disaster to another, it in many ways comes from this date in 2014. The Chinese government doesn't like having anyone stand up against them. They do not like challenges to their power. And these people, these Chinese people in Hong Kong, dared stand up against them. Now, it has failed. The Umbrella Movement of 2014 failed entirely. Not because the people who protested weren't brave or visionary or decent, not that they didn't make sacrifices, which they have. Many of the leaders of the protests in 2014, some of them only teenagers at the time, are now in prison. Some of them are in prison in mainland China. Many of them have fled. And it is because this was the day where China decided they were going to end Hong Kong. This day is important because of that. And I don't know what's going to happen in the future, because without Hong Kong, what connection does China have with the outside world? All it has is bulliness, it's aggressiveness, it's belligerence, it's crass greed. And Hong Kong was the door to the rest of the world. Hong Kong was China as it could have been. Well run, well governed, a people who had grown up without living in fear of starvation or arrest or persecution. These are people who are creative, smart, hardworking. They built one of the most amazing cities in the world. And they were an open city without losing their Chineseness. They were everything that China could and should be. But the communists in Beijing will never allow that. And until they are gone, pity the people of Hong Kong. So, this was today, 28th of September. On this day, the Umbrella Movement began. Come back tomorrow for more. Bye-bye.